He opened up to his daughter about his lifelong anxiety, and it changed both their lives forever. Today's guest is Scott Ramey. Scott was born in the Midwest, and he was a Division I athlete with a dream to play in the NBA. But that dream would come to an end after he suffered a debilitating injury that would ultimately end his basketball career forever. Scott was always driven to succeed, but behind that identity, he was playing with what he calls the masking tax. Decades of anxiety, pressures, and a nervous system that he just couldn't seem to turn off. In this episode, Scott gets vulnerable and opens up about his imposter syndrome, success reluctance, toxic leadership models he once copied, and the moment he told his family it was time to make a change. We talked about the cost of always being the fixer and how his leadership style transformed when he stopped pretending. And finally, why legacy isn't what you leave behind, it's really how you show up day to day. If you've ever looked successful on the outside, but you felt like you were barely holding it together on the inside, you're going to truly enjoy our real and authentic conversation. So without further ado, please enjoy Scott Ramey and his clocking out journey. Hey, Scott, welcome to the podcast. It's so nice to see you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, I am as well. And for context, you and I met through a dear friend of mine who I've known for several years now, Steve Meller. He had suggested you for the Clocking Out podcast here, and you and I connected, and I was looking at your work. And the one thing that struck me was you've only been doing this for less than 2 years now. And when I was on your LinkedIn profile, I went to your website, I watched your 3-minute video and really started to look at the work that you're doing. It feels like you've been doing this for almost a decade now. Like you are putting out so much really inspiring content, and just kudos. It's almost as if you were so ready for this transformation, and it's like this could have happened, I feel like, years ago. I'm glad that it happened now, and I'm so happy to bring your story to our listeners, but it's so inspiring.
Thank you so much. That means a lot, Raymond. It really does. I mean, being the face of your own organization is really difficult, because I'm sure a lot of your listeners, as they're going through a transition, are accustomed to representing a bigger brand, a bigger organization. And so I had a lot of apprehension. I still am not really comfortable being the face of the franchise, so to speak, because I always like to push power. I like to be the guy behind the scenes, popping up people. So thank you for sharing that. I had a lot to say, I guess, is maybe the better way to think about it. When you can create your own identity and create something you've had in your mind. Bob Proctor is one of my favorite meditations around abundance. He says, if you can hold it in your head, you can hold it in your hand. And so I had this idea for years. It's evolving literally as we speak here today, but I did feel like, and I do feel like I have a lot to say from 30 plus years of experience and lessons I've learned that I want to share. And hopefully I can give a little bit of inspiration, knowledge, guidance. I don't know what we could call it, or all the above to individuals who I interact with on a daily basis.
Yeah, you certainly inspire action for sure. After I watched your video, it gave me so many ideas of things that I can do differently in my day-to-day just from that 3-minute video.
Oh, wow.
And so I think action is certainly one outcome, and really excited to share who you are. So let's start from the beginning. Tell us, where are you from? Where'd you grow up?
Yeah. Well, I just celebrated my 54th birthday, I guess. Yeah, 54th birthday on February 2nd. And my father, I grew up in Indiana, so watching the Indiana Hoosiers play football and do it really, really well has been something we've not seen in my lifetime. One of 4 boys, small town Indiana kid, 12,000 people, Crawfordsville, Indiana. And everything I stand for is everything that Indiana taught me, which is try to be as humble as possible, courteous, conscientious, We also had 35 foster kids, plus or minus, come through our home as we were growing up. So not only did mom and dad raise 4 boys, but we had at least one other child with us at some point or another, ranging from just a few months old to mid-teens, late teens. So it fostered it fostered an environment of chaos, and but I think probably not in a negative way, but in a positive way. But also fostered a sense of competitiveness. So as I used to say to my teams when I was in corporate America, is I'm a ruthless competitor, and not in a good, not in a bad way. Like I think you can serve the greatest good and still be super competitive. But growing up in small town Indiana with 1 or 4 boys, like, you learn how to compete. And so I was an athlete, probably an athlete because it gave me peace and quiet, like, dribbling the basketball and that kind of the rhythm sound of the ball bouncing to this day still soothes me. So I think it was my release to kind of get outside of the chaos that was day to day that I was living within. Ended up playing Division I basketball. It was my sport that I decided to kind of lean into. And, one thing led to another. I had aspirations to play overseas. I knew I wasn't NBA good, but I thought I could play overseas. And injuries ended my career. And coincidentally, it not only did it end my career, but it triggered kind of a whole different path around living with anxiety and panic most of my adult life. And so, when you have your identity wrapped in a certain thing, and I think maybe your listeners can relate to this in terms of our careers, probably akin to not really able to distinguish who we are versus our career and our career identity. I had that experience when I was 19 where I had my first panic attack, and it was because my identity was wrapped up in sport. And maybe to some degree or another, I was carrying like the weight of small town America on my shoulders away because everybody was so proud of me and believed in me and thought, but it was kind of this really unbelievable moment where you have all the confidence in the world until you don't. And that experience, because I think living with anxiety and panic, the worst thing about it is the anticipation of the next event. You don't know when it's going to happen. So if I'm being really reflective and honest with you, I look back like, how on earth did you have such success in corporate America living with anxiety and panic your entire life? But we were able to make it happen.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that. I feel like you, at such a young age, to have the weight of that identity. And did your parents, or did you feel like there was an expectation that you were going to get to a certain level? Like, was there that pressure that led to you feeling, not necessarily from just your parents, but, being one of 4 boys, and, was there other things that were happening that sort of kind of created this feeling that you needed to prove something to somebody?
I think it definitely was, but it was 100% self-imposed. Again, I think when you grow up in an environment, which by all accounts, every memory I have was a really positive childhood. It really was. I mean, we had a lot of fun, and when you grow up in a small town like that, you feel really safe and secure. You feel the support and love of everybody in the community. I don't know that I necessarily really understood until frankly recently, as I exited and started my own business and started to really spend time on myself and healing from my experiences and trying to get better and improve for this next step in my journey. I didn't necessarily understand the toll of that my childhood and frankly that my career had on me emotionally until I was able to step back and reflect. So I think what I would say about my parents did is the best job they possibly could. Like, they had their hands full and they gave us and provided for us in a way that was really beautiful. And I'm super grateful for that. How our bodies and our sympathetic nervous system, parasympathetic nervous system respond to different things. If I think I was receiving warning signs throughout my whole adult life, and I was ignoring those warning signs, and I wasn't doing the work to really heal the traumatic events that I had experienced. And trauma shows up. What I've learned, trauma shows up in very, very different ways. But I had a tendency to want to fix things. I was the second youngest of 4. And so our older brother, Brian, was 5 years older. So like, I really kind of was that middle child, but I was always the mender, the fixer. And what I found, and again, in retrospect, it's all easier from a distance now, is I took that same mindset to every role I had in corporate America. I was the fix it guy. Like if an organization was broken, I wanted to go fix it because I would rally the troops and I take on that responsibility. And frankly, it just became to the point where it was so much for me to continue to carry. And I wasn't broken, but I was darn near close to breaking and imploding many times in my career because I just had this strong desire to want to fix things all the time. Mm-hmm. So I think that's probably what I've learned most is that it's an unreasonable burden to carry on. And in hindsight, and I really appreciate your question, Raymond, I'm sure I took that weight with me to college, representing small town, first Division I athlete from my high school. You know, the love and support I had from that community. It's like everybody wanted to see all of us succeed in the community, and not just me, but anyone. There was just such support for success. And a lot of kids stayed and farmed. A lot of kids went to the military. A lot of kids went vocational. Some went to college. I mean, we had the whole gamut back then in the early, late 80s, early 90s. But the one constant thing is like, if you're from that community, people supported you. And I no doubt took that weight with me. And lesson learned too well, perhaps I carried that weight with me into everything I did until, frankly, recently, I realized that I don't have to carry that weight anymore.
Yeah. So you're in high school, Division I, you're in college, Division I, playing basketball. At what point so you had this identity of Division I basketball player, and you're going to college. There's probably a moment when you now had to sort of like, there's a reality that you're not going to be a professional basketball player, and that now college and your degree is really important. And I guess, what was that moment? And then what did you ultimately focus on in terms of an academic degree?
Yeah. Well, the moment was really clear. I broke my foot 5 times in the same spot. So my career was over. And that's coincidentally when I went to tell the coaches I was transferring because I realized that basketball was no longer my future and I wanted to focus on academics. I had aspirations. I was a history major, so I had aspirations to go to law school. And, I'll be honest. I had aspirations to become a Supreme Court justice, not just law school, which was like, in hindsight, probably very unrealistic, but, never say never, I say.
Yeah.
But it was that moment when I went to tell the coaches and the athletic training staff that I was leaving this when I had my first panic attack. So I transferred to a small college called John Carroll University in Cleveland. Great institution, Jesuit-led, really, really focused on learning. And, the Jesuits themselves are just great learners. And so I was just blessed to be in an environment where they challenged me academically. Then I was exposed to financial services. And as an intern, I needed a job over the summer to make ends meet. So I found myself working at a broker dealer called McDonald & Company Securities up in Pepper Pike, Ohio. And I got exposed to the financial advisor world. I'm like, wait, this is kind of fun. And so that was the beginning of a 30-year career in financial services. So I started as an intern, then I became a financial advisor. And then I was an internal wholesaler, external wholesaler, sales leaders, and then kind of just my career took off from there.
Wow. So when you started this career as a financial advisor, did you feel at the time that like, this is who I am, this is going to be my new identity? And were you seeing a pathway that was going to lead to like career fulfillment, or were you just in the moment like, hey, I'm happy to have a job?
What I probably thought in that moment was, I love interacting with people, and this is a pretty good way to interact with a lot of people. What I underestimated is how difficult that job would be, and that role is. And back then I had a full head of hair, and I looked every bit of 22 years of age. But I also would find that when I would connect with people, that they would just bring me checks, and they would invite me in to sit down at their kitchen table, and they would offer up all their financial statements. And so part of me is like, wow, you talk about imposter syndrome. What am I going to do with a couple $1 million for this really wonderful family, and they don't even know me? So I guess I learned a lot of things. I learned that probably wasn't the thing for me, just because I didn't necessarily enjoy being on an island by myself. I like being in a team environment. But I also learned that the skills that I was taught up to that point from my family and watching my grandmother interact with people are 100% transferable. But at the same time, I was just riddled with anxiety. So I'm like, am I going to be found out to somebody who I'm not? And that whole imposter syndrome concept went with me through I always felt like I was going to be found out to be a fraud. And, it's interesting what pressure does to us. Pressure doesn't necessarily enable us to completely build trust with people. And this is what I find with the organizations and leaders I work with today. And it kind of creates this vicious circle. So we put more pressure on ourselves, and then we start masking more. And then we wonder why we're not building trust, and the cycle continues. So I found a path in financial services, but it really wasn't until I started leading people that this is what I love to do. I love to build teams, lead teams. It reminded me of being in a locker room. It reminded me of bringing disparate people together with different values, different ideas, and like, how can I meld and mold this team together with my image of what I would love for us to accomplish, and watching people overachieve in terms of what they think they're capable of. So it wasn't until I started leading people like, this is the ticket. I love doing this.
How did you become this sort of inspiring leader, but then managing this anxiety and stress and this imposter syndrome? Like, those two forces must have been incredible.
There was a point. So from 2003 to 2006, I worked for a consultancy, and I was an individual contributor up to that point. And this is probably an early indication I wasn't necessarily meant to be in corporate America my entire life, but I went to work for this small little boutique consultancy. And I spent time with the founder for 3 years, and also got introduced to my mentor, Bob, who I worked with for 20 years. And it wasn't until that point where I really started grappling with this concept. And again, I don't love the concept of imposter syndrome, just because it's just been different for me, but I guess it's probably an apt title or in description. But when I got exposed to Bob, and I started understanding what my real potentiality could be, and so I found and started to know someone who believed in me more than I ever believed in myself. And he introduced me to a concept called success reluctance. And the basic principle is that these are lessons that we learn too well, and that it's like a cat that steps on a hot stove won't step on a cold one either. And what a lot of what I was feeling was just self-talk, but I had so many earlier similar events that have led me to this point that I was kind of on this constant loop, this cycle that wouldn't break. And so my work with him and his coaching of me literally catapulted me into a whole different level from an awareness standpoint, but then also helped me understand what it would take to be a really great leader. It wasn't without struggle, though. My first leadership role, I had no identity about how I wanted to define leadership, and what I felt like a good leader, what I felt like it would require for me to be a good leader. It was very much, frankly, it was a very toxic leadership style, because I didn't have my own identity. I didn't have my own opinion. I just did what I felt like I needed to do. And it didn't work for me. And it didn't work for me so much that I was so aware that it wasn't going to work for me that I vowed I would never lead like that again. Just blindly trusting leaders, being very dictatorial in a way, very, very matter of fact. It just wasn't my true identity. And after that experience, like, I am never going to lead like that again. And I started to create and form my own leadership style that was very unique and distinct to me. And that's when my career took off. When I just stopped trying to pretend and just started to be myself and lead through my intuition and introduce things that I thought would work, concepts I thought would work. And then I started repeatedly catching lightning in a bottle with really great teams, because I realized my job was just to collect great people, guide and direct them, not micromanage them, and enable them, trust them, believe in them, empower them, all these incredible adjectives that we use to describe the leaders that we feel the best, have brought the best out in us. When I started leading like I wanted to be led, and like in the true authentic nature of who I am, my whole career shifted, and it kind of just took off from there.
Wow. I love that story. I love this mentor, Bob. Seems like a fantastic human who really gave you the confidence and instilled the confidence that you needed to really kind of elevate yourself. And I think, we tell ourselves these stories in our subconscious and words of affirmation. I think hearing it from someone else, like a mentor who really sees the potential, takes it from the subconscious to the conscious, and then it drives you forward. And I feel like, at varying stages of our lives, having these mentors that aren't family members, but they're people who they have this visual of what your potential can be, and they know it. They really know it. And so they can say it with confidence. And then you hearing that gives you what you need in order to move forward. So you're in this career, you're working in corporate, you've evolved to a place where you're making the impact in terms of the work that you're doing. You sort of gotten to a place where you're a leader, you love the impact of elevating leaders, but you're in the walls of this sort of very restrictive cage. And there's all kinds of stuff that's happening that you're like, I love this work, but I'm not loving it where I'm at. And I wonder if you can share how that buildup occurred, where you realize, you know what, I need to find a different environment to do this work. And I just wonder if you can share what the buildup was and what was the breaking point.
Yeah, obviously without getting into a whole bunch of specifics about the the moment and the events per se, but again, it's easy in hindsight to look back. It was my body was telling me, my nervous system was telling me it was time for 5 to 10 years. It certainly showed up physically with my weight, but I definitely felt it from a nervous system standpoint. And now kind of as you step outside of it and look back, wow, you were redlining all the time. There was a moment though, a very specific moment that I'll never ever forget. And I want to say it was probably 3 years ago, maybe not quite 3 years ago. I had gone to have a procedure at Mayo Clinic here in Jacksonville where we're located. Before the procedure, they were doing all this, the standard testing, but they had a mini EKG, I guess, on my heart to make sure my heart was stable, and it wasn't. And I had an arrhythmia for the first time that I was not even aware of. And so they had to bring in a cardiologist, and it turns out everything seemed to be on the surface okay, but it wasn't. I mean, that was a definite signal that something wasn't right. And I remember getting back from the procedure and recovering from it and just sitting at the kitchen table with Michelle, my wife, and I break down. I'm like, I just cannot continue working in this environment. The toxicity that it had created, the impact it was having on my body. Again, because when you're a fix-it person, you want to fix it. I was never one to just go through the motions because I'm happy I had a job. I just never felt that was my responsibility. My responsibility was, if it's broken, you need to fix it for the greatest good. Because one thing Bob and I talked a lot about is we would define ethics as the greatest good for all concerned. And I, to this day, still 100% believe in that. If you're a leader of an organization, a large organization, have a lot of people you're responsible for, I felt like I owed it to them to do my darndest to make sure I could help fix whatever was going on in the organization. But there was such a helplessness that I felt that moment that I just broke down, and Michelle did her best to console me. But I would say that was an absolute breaking point, where I knew that this path wasn't sustainable for me and I needed to look for alternatives and figure out what my next was going to be. So that was a really defining moment. The other defining moment as it relates to kind of setting myself free was a conversation I had with my oldest daughter. She called me. She had been suffering from, she played soccer in college, and so she had been benched, and she was really disappointed and having a lot of challenges, the least of which was that she had failed her first speech in a speech class. She received a failing grade, but she was also suffering from a little bit of anxiety. But she was the first person that I shared with that I had been living with my anxiety my entire life. And so that was just over 2 years ago. And so other than Michelle, nobody knew that I lived with anxiety my entire life. And so that unburdened me as well. And it was a great moment for both of us because it gave her confidence to realize that she wasn't broken and that she was going to be great, and she's doing great as well. But it also unburdened me with carrying around this weight that I had been so reluctant to share with anybody because, after all, I'm her father. I can't share with my kids that I have this perceived weakness, quote unquote. So that gave me the confidence too. So there's a whole series of events, and then the final event was sitting with all of them on the back porch, my wife and my two daughters, Aubrey and Sasha, on the back porch, and saying, "Hey, Dad's gonna take a leap. I'm going to start my own business. Are you guys all in? Because I need you to be all in. This is going to be a whole different level of distraction for me." And seeing the enthusiasm that they had, Raymond, for me, I was like, oh man, that was so moving. Like they have been betting on me their entire lives, and they finally realized I was going to bet on myself. And so that just catapulted me into the next journey, because I realized at that point they had seen how unhappy I was. They knew that I would be happier, and I hate to say it, but they've been pretty much right on everything since they were born, and Michelle's been right on everything since we got married. So I hate to admit that fact, but it's true.
Wow. Pretty emotional stuff.
It's heavy. It is. Hopefully that's for your listeners.
Listen, I appreciate it. Scott, I think that what you're sharing is so relatable, because especially for a male who you're the fixer, but you want your family to feel like I'm flawless as well. Like I am someone who can, fix things, but having that, that pressure of perfectionism and flawlessness can be so burdensome on your body, and it's your identity. Like early on when you were in high school, you had this anxiety, these panic attacks, and that was part of your identity. That was who you are as a person, and you suppressed that for so long. And the fact that you, at the breaking point that you had, you decided that I'm going to open up my imperfections, and I'm going to share that with the people who love and care about me, and I'm going to expose the flaws that I have. That is so therapeutic. And I wrote these 3 things down: the breaking point, share your identity, and chart your new journey. And you can't chart a new journey unless you do number 2, which is share your identity. Is like, you represent who, I'm getting goosebumps, like you represent yourself of who you are, whether it's the good, the bad, the ugly. And coming to grips with that from your high school years and being open to your kids, like you grew through it, but they grew even more hearing you say that, because what that does is it allows them to enter the world and realize I don't have to be perfect like Dad. Like I have imperfections, and it's okay.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that and saying that, Raymond. Aubrey's response was the most revealing thing. She said, Dad, you do? I had no idea. This is the other thing. Again, I think over my career, literally have led thousands of people. I don't know what the exact number, but it's a lot of people. There's not a day, not a week that goes by where I don't get a message in LinkedIn that somebody's listening to a podcast I've been on that used to report to me that, or maybe not. And everybody says the same thing. We had no idea. You covered it so well. I'm like, yeah, it was called masking. I paid them, it's a new phrase I use a lot. I paid the masking tax for years and years and years, and to my detriment and to my family's detriment. When I think of the sales organization and leaders I work with today, so many of us take the energy home. It has an impact on us, on the family, has an impact on the family, has an impact on our time. It really is a detriment, because we care so much to want to do such great work. I didn't realize how quick I was to go off the handle. Like I felt like I was like at work, and when I was leading organizations, nobody knew anything was going on. I mean, you go look at the financial crisis in '08, every major crisis, I was the steady hand. Because that's what I was taught. Like, you are, no matter what is happening, be the point, the stable point in the organization, because it's going to become a magnet. You'll be the light. People will be drawn to you. And it is so true. When, all hell was breaking loose, everybody knew that I was going to be the one who's going to guide us through no matter what. I think of the pandemic, and we had to move, thousands of associates to work from home in the matter of days. Like, I was the one that would just be this steady hand on the rudder saying, follow me, we're going to make this happen. But I paid the tax, and I paid it in a big, big way. And I've spent the last year and a half recovering and fixing myself emotionally and physically, because I paid that tax for so long. So I hope if anybody who feels like they have to continue to mask their own reality, I would say it's a detriment. Trust me, it is. And to the degree that sharing my story gives people inspiration to have difficult conversations that they would not have, then I think it would be a good thing, honestly.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing it. And I wonder, did you start charting the new journey while you were working? Like in your mind, were you already starting to formulate this new identity and new path that you were going to take once you clocked out?
Yeah, I did. It's very different now than it was. I love. I'm a reader. I mean, these books I've read all of them. Then there's some 2 more shelves over here. I love to read, and so I've been charting and taking notes for literally. I have binders and binders of stuff. Like if I were to start my own business, this is what I would do. Initially, when I launched my business, it was all about helping anxious presenters because I was known in corporate for being a decent presenter. I'm not going to say a great presenter, but somebody who could really inspire from a stage, and that was part of my role. Like when we roll out new strategies or whatever it might be, I was the guy that was going to go deliver it, go deliver to the board the new strategy, and okay, I'll do it. So I was always quick to raise my hand. I know you're not surprised to hear that. And although it scared the hell out of me, it was something I loved to do because it was the exhilaration and the rush of the competition, probably more than anything. So when I started my business, it was all about, well, I want to help anxious presenters, but I felt like I was diluting the impact I could have just focusing on that particular segment of the population. And I truly believe you're most uniquely positioned to help the person you once were, and the person I once was a sales leader and a leader who struggled early to build trust and connection with inside the organization and out. And so if I can create and package that solution to help organizations, sales organizations and leaders communicate clearly so that they're felt and that they're building a deeper level of trust, then you can inspire change in organizations. You can move the organization forward. You can obviously have a greater impact on your sales results if you're inspiring trust. And so, again, 30 years of experience. I know what works, what doesn't work. And it's pretty easy for me now to go into a sales organization and that's behind plan and understand what they're going to do. Typically, I call it the more trap. We do more, because we didn't hit goals, so we got to do more. And it just creates this vicious circle. And then we do more meetings, more KPIs, more, and then it deteriorates trust. And then we start to mask because we feel like we have to perform, not be who we really are. And then that creates lack of trust. And then it's just a vicious circle and cycle. And so, I've seen it. I've seen the movie over and over again. And I've seen it with leaders too. Leaders roll out strategy. Nothing happens. Like, why didn't our strategy land? We were clear. So let's just do more meetings, more communication. And the reality is it's not what they're saying, it's how they're saying it oftentimes. I think my intuitive nature, what I've learned in the work that I've done on myself, Raymond, is that I'm an empath. So oftentimes I'd walk into a room and I would feel anxious, but the reality of the situation wasn't me at all, it was the room. I also learned severe ADHD. So, which is not surprising because I love taking on new challenges. So I'm like, okay, that intuitively makes sense to me. That ADHD is driven why I like taking on new things. But all of it helps inform the very work I do today, because the cool thing about what I do now is every day I'm working with different clients and every day I have a different challenge. So like I knew I needed to design my new role in my new organization. One, to keep me safe. I wanted to have my nervous system safe all the time. And I do not do anything that puts my nervous system in an uncomfortable position. The second is, how can I capitalize on the skill that I've created and accumulated over the years, who am I best able to serve based upon my earlier experiences? And then third, just have fun, every day. Like I have fun. I'm not doing anything that puts me in a vulnerable position any longer. I don't have to do that. And I take on work with clients who I feel like I can make a strong connection with and have a real impact. I don't have to sell anybody because that's, I kind of stand against everything that I'm seeing today in terms of like hard selling process, et cetera. Like I stand against it because I don't think it builds trust in a marketplace. And so, yeah, I've been thinking about this for a long time, and it's coming to reality, into life right in front of my eyes.
That's great. I love that. I love the not what, but how, in terms of inspiring leaders, sales leaders, leaders in general. You have a statistic that is 66% of employees report burnout. And, your story, there was this buildup that led to burnout, which led to symptoms that you were experiencing that led to the breaking point and deciding, hey, it's time. And I wonder, why is that number so high? Like, why aren't more people responding to the symptoms that they're experiencing and making a change?
From an employee standpoint, like in organizations, fear of the unknown. A lot of it is financial situation, probably too. Like, are they in a position where they can take a bet on themselves financially? Do they have commitments and things of that? I mean, these are all the considerations I had before I made the leap. Like, okay, I've got 2 girls in college. Like, is now the right time for me to start my own enterprise and to build my own business, given the commitments I have financially? And the answer is probably is never a good time. Like, it's going to be hard no matter when you do it. And that's what I've learned. It's going to be hard. It's going to take time, energy, and commitment. But thinking about it differently, thinking about, like, again, going back to my roots, Midwest, small town Indiana kid, we were taught save, 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 save. And I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs from the Midwest, and the same mindset, this Midwest mindset, like save, 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 save for a rainy day and to retire. So work, 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 retire. What I realized when I started my business is, like, I have a lot of left to give. I don't like downtime. I like to stay busy. But what if I created an enterprise, and if I created a business that gave me freedom and flexibility and control that I could do for a long time? Because I'm not going to be somebody that in a point in time, and I think this is it's a both and approach. Like, I never imagined, even before, when I was in corporate America, in the thick of it, I never thought, like, I'm going to hit a day and I'm going to retire. It was always, I'm going to hit a day and I'm going to figure out what to do next. Like, do some consulting. Well, ironically, do some consulting, do some coaching. And so I said, well, why wait? Why not build it now and create a business that I can, or create an enterprise that I can, and something I can do long in past retirement? Because I don't think, some of the statistics came from the work I did in financial services. The problem with the industry is that we define retirement as a point in time. And the fact of the matter is, it's not. It's a journey. We validated that through some work we did and studies we did in financial services. And so, like, why don't I create a journey that is sustainable for me well beyond whatever age? Like, that was just, so I had to rewire and rethink a lot about retirement, coming from from financial services, where we're focused on accumulating for retirement, to saying, okay, well, what is it that I want? And I've gotten to know some really amazing people who are well into their late 60s, early 70s, that are still doing amazing, beautiful, incredible work. They're just not doing it every day, all day long. So my thinking was, rather than go back into corporate America, even after I've healed, like, go back into corporate America. Then I just don't think I could do that. I certainly love working with my corporate clients, but being in that environment all the time, not my solution for the future. But why don't I create something that's mine, that I can monetize on the back end and either sell it or stay in it. But I'll decide. I'm in control. I'm going to create what I want to create. I'm not going to leave it to somebody else to do it on my behalf.
I love that. I think that if you're in that 66%, just based on what you just said, you can create a side hustle where you carve out a percentage of your time, your day. There's so many hours in a day. And if we really reflect and think about, where are we spending our time? And even if you just put an hour of time a day and commit it to something that is a side hustle, that is something you own, you control. It could be a thought, an idea. You get that thought or idea from consuming content, reading books, educating yourself, and you really just start to absorb and build knowledge in an area that really inspires you. And then you just take action and you just start doing things.
Yeah.
That's the start. And it's like, you don't have to walk away from the corporate job. I think the reality is that we have daily commitments with finances and kids and school and all the things. And it's like, okay, if I can't do that, then what can I do today that begins that process? Because then we will get to where you and I both are, where we've spent this, several decades in corporate, and it becomes insurmountable, the idea that we are going to have to leave. And so you can start making baby steps today to really get to the point where then, I love this quote, the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain of change.
So true.
Right.
Well, yeah, and as you said, as you were talking to me, when you reminded me, I actually did pick up a book, and this is not an endorsement, but it's a great book. It's called 2 Weeks Notice. So I was in the financial services industry. If you have an outside business, I'd have to disclose it. So I didn't create my business. I couldn't create my business technically because, number one, if I'm as a senior level leader in an organization, go to my boss and say, can I have permission to start an outside business activity per requirements of FINRA? Like, that's not a good idea. So all of mine was concept and theory. But the book, 2 Weeks Notice, Amy Porterfield wrote it. She wrote it based upon this very idea. It's like, you can definitely create a side hustle. I saw a post the other day on LinkedIn. His name escapes me at the moment. He said a $150 digital product, you sell 9 a day, is $567,000 a year. And you know how easy it is to create a digital product now? It's so easy. And it's so easy to spin up a landing page in a funnel. Literally, with AI, you can do it in a few hours with no skill. I had none of this skill. I've taught myself how to do ads, like all of this stuff that I would have never, ever tried out of fear is very easy to do. And so, yeah, I had Amy's book on my bedside table for months and read it. It's called 2 Weeks Notice. Just say, okay, well, if I were to do this, how would it look? How would I start it? And so, yeah, a side hustle is totally doable if you're in the right environment with the right. If you're not in financial services, it becomes a little more difficult, not impossible. But yeah, I would have loved to have had a side hustle to help, because what I've learned is it does take time, of course. But I think some of the guidance I was giving earlier on is focus on who, not what. So focus on who you want to serve first and foremost. So if you want to create a side hustle, who is your avatar? What is your ideal client profile, customer profile? Start there. Understand what problem do you solve? What is your uniqueness? What's the message you want to enter into the marketplace? All exercises and things I went through. Because then once you have the who down, determine what you're going to offer them and how you're going to position your unique knowledge set is really quite simple in terms of how you create your frameworks and things of that nature so application is easier for people to utilize your stuff. But I would say this to anybody considering a side hustle or doing what I've done, is it hard? Yes. Is it unbelievably rewarding? Far outweighs how difficult it's been to start a business from scratch. Far. And the complexity of my business isn't the complexity that someone listening would need to create. Like I said, digital product, $9 or $150, $100 digital product. What we all know, and I'm sure most of your listeners have, is a very unique skill that is unique to them. We often discount how unique our skill is. Like, but that's not the point. Like, the point is just, it's unique. We all have a skill that can be transferred to someone else, that someone would pay money for, in some instances a lot of money for, if we have the courage to put ourselves out there and share it. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah. Well, I want to add to your 2 Week Notice. I think The 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss is also, when you think about a side hustle and how do you manage that time, figuring out how do you condense your work week to a manageable. I know it's very provocative, but it is a good book to start thinking about how you can do that.
Yeah.
So Scott, I wanted to ask, you said you just turned 54 and you've been at this for just 2 years now, this new platform you're creating, which is named after you. And I'm wondering, when you think about the word legacy, as you've entered this new chapter in your life, in your career, what does that mean to you in terms of the impact that you make on the world? It's a big question, but I'm curious how you think about that.
I got to show you this. This literally came yesterday. It says, this is the Resonance Edge, my brand that I've created. Getting this hat, this is going to sound really, really cheesy and weird, perhaps. This to me is what it's about. So, I don't, it's interesting. I had this conversation recently with a dear friend of mine. She asked me about my legacy. I don't spend a lot of time. I know this is a question that is asked as we get later in our career, in our life. I don't think a lot about legacy because I kind of witnessed my legacy in real time with my daughters. Michelle and I, our legacy is already, our legacy has been written with them. And that's how I truly see my legacy, is through them and through their eyes, and seeing how remarkable they are as young women, how much pride and confidence they have. How Aubrey is career is flourishing in her first year at UBS in Chicago. Sasha's waiting for law school acceptances as we speak. Like my work is done in terms of legacy. I truly believe that. What I think about now is what impact can I have on as many people as I possibly can to ease the burden they have on a day-to-day basis. I think that's my calling as it relates to the work I do today, is that there's an easier way. I know the way. I have the path for sales leaders and leaders. So, but I don't view that as my legacy per se. I just view it as kind of my mission to serve people, because I've been incredibly fortunate to have really great people surround me for a long time in my career. I had a great corporate career, off to a good start as an entrepreneur. I mean, last year was my first full year as an entrepreneur, but I do have something to say. And I think that, like other thought leaders, I dare call myself a thought leader per se at this point, but eventually, hopefully I'll be considered a thought leader. It's because they had something that they thought was valuable and should be shared. And it's a point of view my point of view is maybe different from others' point of view. And I think that's okay too. It worked for me. I hope it works for others.
Yeah, that is incredibly inspiring. So it sounds like your legacy started when you became in touch with your identity, and you really you brought your true self to the world, and that true self has impacted your family in a positive way. And I think that's when your legacy actually begins, is when it's the day that you are real with yourself, how you show up in the world, your authenticity, you rip the armor off, you take the mask off. And it's like, my legacy is being who I am and who I was called to be. And then everything else is sort of like, that's the work, right? And so that's what resonated with me.
I appreciate that.
In terms of that. And so I appreciate that as well, because I feel the same way. I feel like, I'm 53, Scott, and, my legacy began 4 years ago, similar to you, where it's sort of like, you're sort of like living this, I'm not going to call it a lie, but you're living a disconnected life of who you really are. And until you get to that moment where you reconcile that, and then you're able to share it with the people that you love, it's just sort of like, what is my legacy? And you don't ever know what it is until you become real with yourself first.
Yeah, no, that's well said. Ironically, the problem I solve is disconnection, but it starts with self, and I think I say it all the time, like, I go to therapy, my daughters go to therapy. Like, our willingness to get help is a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness. And part of the reason I still love my Indianapolis Colts is because they have a campaign they created called Kick the Stigma. And, it really, 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 really upsets me when I hear other men downplay or diminish mental health challenges in America, or anybody for that matter, but especially men, because it's perceived as some sort of weakness. And, when I was growing up, deodorant commercials never let them see you sweat. I took that literally, Raymond. Like, never let them see you sweat. But when you have panic, you're going to sweat.
Yeah.
And when I first panic attacks early on in my corporate career, I sweated a lot, and I always felt like I was broken. What I have come to realize is that the very weakness that I perceived as early on in my career is the very strength and uniqueness that I have today, is my ability to sense when someone is not communicating authentically, either in a sales opportunity, leadership opportunity, and watching how they're unable to create trust in the organization because they're unwilling to be themselves. And so the very thing I thought for years was a weakness is really my strength, my uniqueness that makes what I do today so powerful with the clients I work with, is because I can see it and I can coach to it. And I can help them overcome that challenge so they are more impactful as a salesperson, as a sales leader. They are more impactful as a leader. They're more believable. It drives me crazy that I hear this thing called, this concept called trust pandemic or trust recession. Not untrue. It's very true. In fact, I believe, though, it is a believability recession. believability precedes trust. And as leaders, if we're trying to implement a new strategy or change the direction of an organization, and it is so important for us to be believable. And if we're not truly who we are, and this is different from being authentic, because I think being authentic can sometimes get us into, is a slippery slope, as I view it. But if we can truly resonate in a way that connects with people so that we can build trust and believability and then have trust, then that's when organizations really start to take off in a positive way. And I've experienced it on so many occasions where it's just the opposite. And so that to me, like if we can create holistic organizations and holistic leaders that get this concept that you can absolutely get more from people without trying harder and doing more, that would be really cool. And so I guess maybe that would be my legacy eventually at some point.
I love it. Well, Scott, I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. This has been amazing. There's so much goodness and love here that I feel like is relatable to people. And I think there's a lot of action here, through your experience and through your journey. I really appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing, things that are uncomfortable, but, I think people relate to that in their own situation. And so really appreciate you carving out some time.
My pleasure, Raymond. Thanks for having me. It's such an honor to be with you today.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks everyone for listening. Until next time. Hello, everyone. It's Raymond again here. I want to take a moment to say a special thanks to our sponsor, Career Minds. They're a global provider of career transition and career development solutions. And if you'd like to hear more on Clocking Out, we'd love for you to take a second and click follow of your favorite podcast app. And while you're there, leave us a rating or review. It really helps new listeners find the show. You can also watch the full episode on YouTube. Just search Clocking Out with Raymond Lee and hit subscribe. And if you're listening on Spotify, don't forget to check out our episode polls or just drop us a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Finally, if you or someone you know has a story to share about navigating change, taking a risk, or rethinking your career, we want to hear from you. Head to the link in our show notes and fill out the form to be considered for a future episode. Until next time, remember, if you're just sitting there thinking that you're stuck or you're unsure of your career or future and you think it's time for a change, I would encourage yourself to ask these 3 questions. Does my career or work make me feel alive? Am I doing the things that genuinely matter to me most? Am I creating value for myself and for others? Until next time.